How you doing, Benny?
Good. How about yourself?
Can't complain. We are just learning and growing constantly, and I am so honored here to have you join us today for a great interview. And we all know you as the founder and CEO of Next Shark, which is such a powerful publication, especially for the Asian American community. Um, Before we start off, I just would love to ask you, can you tell us a bit about yourself, how you got started getting to do what you do now, which is so impactful to the Asian American community?
That's a lot to touch on. I think that well, first of all, I'm honored to be here. Appreciate you having me here as a guest, and definitely a big fan of the work that you've done and the platform you've built too, Francis.
Thank you.
Um, as far as mine, I mean, my it's been very organic for me. I think I would look at it as I grew up in the Bay Area to Chinese immigrant parents who came here in the 1980s. Was definitely raised in a very with conservative Asian values. Growing up, seeking, comfortability as like a doctor or a lawyer, or more careers that are more like sustainable and all that good stuff. And obviously, academics were heavily stressed during those years.
Mhm.
But I think I look at it as I've always felt that I had a big affinity to Asian American identity. I had a very small period in my life where, I was like, oh man, I wish I was white, blah blah blah, because I feel like those kids get treated better. I don't get that sort of stuff at home or whatever, or just those like negative thoughts, right? But I quickly realized, I mean, entering like middle school and up to towards high school, that to be really proud of your heritage. And I kind of went through that whole like Asian pride phase growing up, and that kind of
Yeah.
stemmed from me facing a lot of instances of bullying and racism, just whether it's at school or whether it's in public. I mean, some of the things I remember is I remember I was in middle school. I think I was 11 years old, and I went to the movie theaters with some friends, and I was just randomly passing by like an old couple. I thought it was a really nice old couple in my head. And I remember distinctively, as right when I walked past them, the old man basically yelled out like "effing Chinaman," and unprovoked completely. And I was just, it's great. It was just really, really weird for me. Um, or in school, like I would face, at lunchtime, people would call me like dog eater, Chinatown, like just using like racial slurs towards me and everything. So it was definitely a challenge kind of growing up in that environment. But I did have like a really good upbringing, and very grateful for that. But as far as like in the context of Neck Shark, I mean, I think that I said this before. I never really imagined that it would grow to something like this, because we were a very different company when we first started. And essentially, Next Shark is started off as an online publication focused on business and success for millennials. And Shark kind of comes from my experience and in online poker, and the fact that when I read up on some of my favorite entrepreneurs, like the late Tony Hsieh, he said like, poker had such a big impact on his outlook and how he, makes decisions and everything. And I really heavily relate to that. So Shark, kind of comes from
Mhm.
that. And then next kind of signifies, next generation and,
Mhm.
the youth or what have you. But about like 2 years in, we noticed that a lot of our Asian-centric content was doing well. And I noticed that every time we featured like an Asian face, a successful Asian American leader, we saw an uptick in engagement, and it seemed like there was like a lot of support being rallied around that. And it's interesting because even from a technical standpoint, and I just found this out like maybe very recently too, is that and for Asian Americans online, we love to consume stuff like on stuff about self development or content that really like I guess builds you up as a person or skills. So it kind of aligned with that. But naturally, because of that content, we were just building a strong Asian American following. And over time, when we started making more of a pivot, where it's like, oh, why don't we feature like more Asian faces, more Asian business owners, right? And people seem to like that a lot. And naturally, as we started evolving, we started getting encouraged by our readers to like cover other outlets, because they said that, hey, you guys are really one of the only outlets that are featuring Asian American faces and painting them in this way and really highlighting the trailblazers in our community. You guys should, maybe start covering politics, maybe more news, more breaking news, more sports. And I was a little apprehensive to it at first, just because like it wasn't, business was in that sort of bubble that I was really looking towards. But I decided to give it a shot. And next thing you know, I mean, for me, I also kind of had a passion for it too. I was like, wow, I mean, if that's really what you're interested in, I mean, why not? I mean, it wasn't something that it's something that I never thought that I could build a business off of, to be honest. I always thought of it as like, if I were to dive into something like this, it would be like, when I'm more extremely successful, and I can kind of go back and give back. And so the fact that I can, build a sustainable company on like, little to no funding, no loans or anything, while also, being a positive destination for our community, I'm very grateful for that.
That's wonderful. That's such an awesome story. Um, and yeah, what you talked about going back to when you were young, and that for me it blows my mind because I was raised in the South in Mississippi, and I definitely faced my share of racism, and it still
Oh,
blows
I'm
my mind that right, yeah, that you there's that is I think one of the core meccas of it, and it still blows my mind that people experience that here in the Bay Area,
Mhm.
and that's for me that's just that it's so hard for me to wrap my mind around because it's such a this is supposed to be a place where there's melting, right, and acceptance, but yeah, I'm
I think
sorry.
it's gotten better over the years. I mean, it's I think that the Asian American community has certainly grown tremendously, especially in the last like 5-10 years. I would think that it's much more diverse then, but I mean, we've seen it all. There's always that sort of, I don't want to say diamond in the rough, obviously. Like there's also always that one person,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
have you. They exist everywhere.
yeah. Well, again, thank you for giving us a voice on your amazing platform. And one of the most famous um, incidents that goes around is almost this rumor, as legend. You worked with and had a connection with president candidate Andrew Yang. So please give us a behind the scenes story of what happened to that. I feel like that's something people talk about and either know some bits about or not, but I want to hear it directly from you. What exactly happened with that little connection there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the context with this is that, I went to UC Irvine, and I knew very early on, especially after high school, that I don't think academics was really going to be my strong suit. I mean, don't get me wrong, I still tried as much as I can in classes. I still struggled, don't get me, tremendously. But I still tried. But in the back of my mind, I knew that I needed some sort of a backup plan, if anything. And I had this notion of I need to get a head start amongst like all my peers, by if I can't really win in academics, or set myself apart, I can maybe set myself apart by having as much experience as possible. And so literally right when I got into my freshman year, I already had a job at Dell, the computer company. I was basically, my job was as a campus rep, was to help like market Dell products on campus.
Wow.
Um, and from there, as a full-time student, I was also trying to rack up as much work hours as I could too. And the thing being was, not only that I want the experience, I also didn't want to depend on my parents really for for financial stability. I wanted to be as independent as fast as possible, really. Um, so I started taking multiple jobs. I mean, there was only a certain amount of hours that Dell could give me at the time. So I started working at the UCI computer store too, where I would help like deliver computers to teachers and staff members
Wow.
all around campus. I used to drive this big anteater truck, which is our our mascot, which is pretty funny. And the hilarious part about that too is like I had just gotten my license at that time too. And so it was like, so, those are like, so it was actually a little nerve wracking at that time, like, driving a big truck like that. But we got it done. And then I ended up, I was really efficient with my time. I mean, I even found a job where I could make money while attending classes. Essentially, I was a campus note taker for, people, that had like, disabilities and wasn't able to, take notes
Wow.
in class. So it also gave me an outlet to get me to go to class while also making money at the same time.
Wow.
But for me, I just felt that even then I still it's these were still like just small hours like here and there, and I really wanted to maximize as much time as I can to get experience. And so I remember browsing through, I believe it was the UC Irvine version of the college board, where it shows where employers could post like job boards and everything. And so I looked it up and I saw a position open as a marketing associate for the Manhattan GMAT. So it was basically a East Coast company. that was basically helping. They sold basic online prep courses for the GMAT. They also did in-person courses as well. So basically, I applied for it, and the funny thing is, I think that if I remember correctly, I think I applied the first time, but I was very irresponsible with answering this with answering emails on time because I was so busy and I wasn't really I just was not polished at the time. And this is actually the first time I talked about this because I remember this finally is that I applied for it first, and then I had gotten an interview. They said that they were interested in setting up an interview and for me to provide a time that I was available. And I remember it took me like I think I didn't respond until a week later, just because I don't know why that happened, but I responded a week later, and then the message that I got was like I apologize, but a big portion of this work is going to have to be on regular communication. You have to communicate back all the time, and so we're going to stop the interview process here. Wish you the best of luck in your endeavors. And so I was like, oh no. But then the quarter after, I remember, I think that I applied for it again, not knowing that it was the same company that basically rejected me for being so unprofessional, But next thing you know, I got an interview, but this time, I was much more polished. I responded like immediately. And on the day of the interview, they were like, okay, so our CEO Andrew Yang is going to be the one interviewing you. And then my first thought was, wow, I'm going to be interviewed by the CEO. My second thought was, wow, he's also Asian. This might be a lot more chill. I mean, part of the same crew, whatever. But it was really far from the case. I remember, right when I got on the phone, I mean, he was very professional, very stern, and he took it. It caught me off guard in a sense where it was like I don't know why I expected an easier interview just because it's like, oh my god, I was an Asian guy or whatever. But anyways, yeah, he was just a very stern, started asking me really hard questions that I was not prepared for. And mind you, I mean, I wasn't sophisticated enough to really understand that, hey, if you want a job, and especially at a certain level, you want to set yourself apart, you got to be doing research on the company that you're applying for. You got to be ready for it. You can't just show up for an interview and suddenly, everything's all groovy and you can talk about how good you are, right? But I remember I couldn't answer the basic questions that he asked me. And at one point, I think he got so frustrated to the point where he kind of blurted out, Benny, do you even know what the highest score on the GMAT is? And then I think I remember something like, it was the stupidest answer ever. I think I was like, I think it's the same score as the SATs or something. I was like way, way, way off. But he basically let out a loud sigh, and then he was like, "Do you do any research on my company prior to this interview?" And I mean, he already knew the answer before I could even reply, to be honest. But I remember for the next 15, 20 minutes, he was kind of lecturing me on how to better prepare for interviews, and basically I can't think to just show up to something and expect to do a good job. It requires preparation. I need to show that I've done proper research on what exactly am I applying for, not just kind of blindly shooting in the dark, right? And
Right.
so he gave me a lot of great advice, and I think at the time I didn't appreciate it as much as I should have, just because I was young and still with a certain mindset. But I needless to say, I still thanked him for all of his advice, and I did take a lot of mental notes. And I just thanked him, and I didn't expect to hear from him ever again. But lo and behold, like a week later, I got a offer letter directly from himself.
Wow.
I was really surprised, but I hopped on board, and I was very glad that I did a great job with them. And I was very happy also to know that he gave me one of my first LinkedIn recommendations too, and it's still up there actually. If you go to my LinkedIn profile, and
Wow.
it's always funny because while he was campaigning, I was like, wow, if this guy really does somehow win, I mean, I could say that I got a LinkedIn recommendation from the president of the United States. That would have been that would have been cool. But either way, this is cool enough. I mean, just to see a former boss like that we go back a long way, just rise up and be such a figure
Yeah.
for our community, and even even a potential good candidate for the country too.
Wow. Thanks for sharing that story. That's so funny and yet so inspiring. And I think it's hilarious that you applied for it again, not remembering it was the first one, but this time you were also better prepared for it. So it went in such a different trajectory because of that little bit of preparation and that little bit of polish you had the second time around.
Yeah, it's funny because looking back it's interesting when I observe myself. I don't really, and it's a very big negative of mine. It's like I tend to just act before I really think things through, but somehow it kind of just works out for me in a sense. And I think that it's definitely important to prepare and have preparation. But for me, like for some reason, I'm just that go 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 type of guy. I mean, I think that the best analogy is if you want to, if we all got in a room and it's like, hey, okay, we want to build a house. All right, cool. So you handle this, you handle that, and okay, Francis, you craft up the the blueprint, and then I'll be on the side already laying down bricks. And that's pretty much. I think that's the best analogy for me, right? And there's some positives to that, but and for some parts it's definitely worked out for me, but I'm definitely learning more and more to think better and to plan better before I act on things.
I love that. That reminds me of the showing a little bit of geekish side of myself. The that one scene from Iron Man when Tony Stark is testing out his armor for the first time, and his famous quote was, "Sometimes you got to learn how to run before you can walk."
Yeah, exactly. So it's I love that analogy too. I love that scene too, by the way. But yeah.
Yeah. I can see that spirit right inside you. It's like, you know what? Let's do it.
What's the worst that can happen? That's fine.
Yeah, and a lot of times you learn so much from that, right? Yeah, I love
Very
that.
true.
So speaking about your work with the Asian American community, and also having such a great start, and your philosophy of just going out there and getting things done, I would love to ask your opinion on this. What do you think 2020 has taught us, especially from the Asian community perspective, have taught us lessons about where we are in connection to the rest of the other communities, and what are things that we really can take to heart going forward from this point onward now?
That's a very good question. I think that it's wrapped around with there's so many angles that I could come with that answer, and I think that in terms of like the general grand scheme of things, I mean, I think that as Asian Americans we learned a lot this year, and we kind of were in this trajectory of seeing you know a lot of people in our community like rising up, whether it's like Andrew Yang and his presidency, to Fresh Off the Boat, to the success of Crazy Rich Asians, and a legion of other Asian American focused films and media that started doing really well, and we were in this really high upward trajectory. And suddenly when coronavirus hit, it was almost as if we went like so backwards. And I think that, and I think I speak for a lot of people and I think I've heard this multiple times, it's like, wow, I've never seen, as an Asian American, I've never seen so much racism targeting my community in a long time, or I've never seen it in general, right? And I think that in a sense, like the bad is that we've kind of realized, and I think John Cho put this really well in the LA Times, is that our sort of Americanness is a little bit is kind of conditional, and if there's any sort of major thing that kind of happens, suddenly like we could be seen as the enemy again, right? And I'm not trying to compare this to like back when the whole attack on Pearl Harbor happened and with Japanese internment and everything, but there's precedents to be had to show like the seriousness of what's happening right now in this country, I think. And I think that it's shown us that we still have a long way to go as society. But I also believe that in a sense, the silver lining is that I see many Asian Americans more interested in their heritage more than ever. If you kind of notice, a lot of Asian Americans, they come from still first generation families, so they haven't really been here for that long, right? And a lot of us are not really aware of Asian American history in general. I mean, the fact that there were the Chinese Americans built the railroads, to all the little things that happened that defined what America looks like today. I mean, the person that's responsible for birthright citizenship, the right that if you're born here, you're a citizen of this country, was because of a Chinese American, right? And I think that if anything, in a sense, I looked at it as we're learning a lot more. We're really like this, discovering our identity a little bit deeper. And I think we're kind of looking at each other, also going like, how do we better support each other? And in a sea of all this like chaos and negativity, I see like so many people in our community, rising up as frontline workers, as donors, as influencers who are using the platforms for good to really, contribute back to their community. And I see this not only just within our community too, but also, our role in helping other minorities, minority communities too, right? During the Black Lives Matter movement, right? A lot of Asian Americans, kind of stood up, side by side, side by side with them to, kind of support, what they were doing. And I think that that's really, really powerful. And I think it kind of shows that, while there are a lot of challenges to be had, we still kind of have each other. And as long as like we do our best to kind of stick together and contribute back in the best way possible, then, we will continue to move forward.
I love that. Thank you for actually sharing that powerful message. And you're right. It's this whole sense of conditionality, right? That was a real wake up call for me as well too. We're running toward the end of the interview here, and I just want to close by asking you if there's one message you want to share, especially going forward with the next generation, because I think you're about to step into a brand new role of being a parent now, which I think is so wonderful and beautiful. What message would you want the next generation, not just for Asian Americans, but also, let's say, from a global village, that you hope we learn from this year going forward for next generations?
Wow, that's a hard one. I'm trying to think. I mean, I would say, be happy. Find there. Everybody has a purpose being here, and I think that part of self-discovery and part of life is to really put yourself out there in any sort of situation that you think want to experiment with. And sometimes you're going to fail, and sometimes like you're going to have good outcomes or bad outcomes, but what the results of that, no matter what that result looks like, it's going to contribute to you growing down the line. And I think that when you kind of have that sort of notion in your mind, it kind of helps like bring your mind back to equilibrium. And I think that it helps bring more clarity to who you are as a person. And also while success is great, and being noticed for your success is great, giving back and being able to find ways to contribute to the people after you, that's really the most important in the end.
Well, thank you. I love that, especially the last one of being reconnected back into your environment, your community. As always, Benny, it's such a pleasure. Always so energizing and inspiring to talk with you. And I hope I get a chance to meet you and see you in person in 2021, or at the very latest 2022. Again, thank you for all the work you do with the community. Some of my students have worked with you, and they have nothing but the most amazing things to say about you. So thank you for helping the next generation already right now, for everything you've done. So I wish you all the best, and I will talk to you again really soon, okay? Take care of yourself, Benny.
Thank you, brother.
Take care. Bye-bye.